Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Brian, and today we're going to take a look at what I consider like a $300 starter gaming PC build, an upgrade path for it, and then some benchmarks for it as well. This build will be basically perfect for any of you guys out there that are kind of looking to get into gaming, PC gaming as cheap as possible. You definitely want to buy new, and your target games are like esports games, titles such as like League of Legends or CS:GO, or games like Stardew Valley, or maybe even Terraria, like games that aren't super graphically demanding. It's not gonna be able to handle the toughest games now, as I just kind of like alluded to, and you'll have to play most games at like 900p or 720p. But down the road, you'll be able to easily upgrade it in order to drastically improve your performance, which is what this whole build is about, improving your performance over time. Now, keep in mind, this video is not meant to show you guys how to build a PC. Instead, it's meant to show you guys what you can expect to get for about $300 if you went out and bought all brand new parts today. If you are interested in the actual building process and kind of like build vlogs, I am working on a couple right now. I actually just got the last components needed for a $500 PC build that I've been planning for a while now. So that is something that I will be working on after this video. So hopefully that will be up on YouTube next week. So a couple things before we get into the parts list. I have chosen not to include tax and shipping. Mainly because those vary from like place to place. They're always different, so I don't like including them because you might not get hit with the shipping charges that I get hit with, and vice versa. Also, keep in mind that pricing does change quite frequently. If you take a peek at this build and the prices have gone up, let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to give you guys some alternatives. Lastly, as always, all related links will be in the description box below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe. It's totally free and it helps us out a ton. Alright, so the CPU/GPU we went with is the Athlon 3000G. This is a 2-core, 4-thread processor that you can grab for about $55 right now. It's supposed to be 50 bucks, but right now it's 55. So this guy has integrated Vega 3 graphics that we will be utilizing for this build in place of a discrete GPU, and it's unlocked, so you can overclock it, which I will tell you right now, you should definitely do, because this is a budget build for one, and this thing will squeak out a lot more performance if you decide to overclock it. And the more performance you get, the better, especially at this price brackets. Now, keep in mind, this is not the best processor in the world, but as you'll see in the benchmarks, it does a solid job. It does a solid job playing games at like 720p or 900p, and it'll do fine doing basic tasks such as browsing the web, watching YouTube videos, and so forth. As for the motherboard, I went with the MSI B450M Pro M2 Max. This is basically one of the cheapest B450 boards on the market, but it is a solid budget option for you guys. It will do fine managing an overclocked 3000G, as well as it should be fine with any non-overclocked 6 or 8 core chip in the future. The board is also Ryzen 3000 ready, and so it will not require a BIOS update in order to actually use the 3000G. That's actually why I chose it, because it is already updated. You can use 3000G with no issues at all. Just make sure that you are going to get the Max version and not the V2 version. Depending on the seller, the V2 version may still require that BIOS update, and so this 3000G chip won't work with it unless it's already been updated. So that's definitely something I don't want you guys to have to worry about, so get the Max version instead. Alright, so moving on to the memory, I chose the Patriot Viper Steel 8GB one stick of 8GB 3000 megahertz RAM. You really could choose any 8GB kit over 3000 megahertz speed, but I would definitely recommend trying to get at least just one stick, not 2 sticks. So one 8GB stick rather than 2 4GB sticks. The reason why I recommend this is because this motherboard only has 2 memory slots available. This means if you decide you want to upgrade to that sweet spot, which is 16 gigs of memory, you'll have to replace your entire kit rather than just adding an additional kit. So this will cost you more money in the long run if you get 2 4GB sticks rather than one 8GB stick. I will have benchmarking towards the end of the video showing the actual performance hit you will take initially from utilizing single channel versus the dual channel memory, which is actually a pretty big deal. I mean, you take a pretty big hit up front, but I really do believe that getting an 8 gig stick up, one 8 gig stick up front will definitely make it's worth it. The performance hit is worth it. For to allow you to upgrade easily to 16 gigs down the road. Now for storage, I chose a 240 gig inland SSD. I love inland. I've used them a lot. They're great products. Like the memory though, you can basically grab any SSD that you're comfortable with. So if you find a cheaper SSD that has good reviews, feel free to grab that SSD instead. Just make sure that you're getting a 240 gig or larger drive, and that's because, well, 240 gigs is not a ton of space, especially once you start adding games to it. I mean, I think GTA 5 is like 90 or 95 gigs alone, so that's like taking up 33% of over 33% of your drive, almost half your drive, which is absolutely incredible. So, we'll address that more in the upgrade path when we're talking about the upgrade path, but try to make sure at least you're getting a 240 gig drive. Don't get 120; it just won't be enough to add games to. The case I chose was the Cooler Master MasterBox Q300L. It's a fine budget case, and it supports micro ATX and mini ITX motherboards. It comes with one fan in the rear, so you'll want to add an additional fan eventually in the front just to make sure you keep solid airflow for all your components. It'll be fine for for the start, but when you get a chance, add that fan to the front bottom corner. And then it also has support for a 240 millimeter rad in the front, and then it also can handle 360 millimeter graphics cards in length. So you should really never have to worry about a GPU that's too long. I think some of the larger ones are like 310, 320 millimeters, so you have tons of space even if you get a massive one. The last component on our parts list is going to be the power supply. For this build, I chose the EVGA BQ 500 watt 80 plus bronze semi-modular power supply. Wow, that's a mouthful. This is a semi-modular power supply, as I just said, and it has great reviews and more than enough wattage for this build as well as future upgrades. So, to explain, what we're looking at is this build will probably run you about 115 watts right now. And then if you decide you want to upgrade to a 3700X, which is an 8-core 16-thread processor, and then say a 2070 Super, as well as add in a 2TB hard drive, you would still only be at about 380 watts. So if you think about it, 500 watts is still, plenty of wattage for even upgrading to that kind of build. So you're perfectly fine for that. And parts generally get more efficient from generation to generation. So 500 watts should be more than enough for you now as well as in the future. All right, now that the parts list is out of the way, let's spend a few minutes talking about your upgrade path for this build before we get into the benchmarks. I really, if you're buying this build, it's $300 build, I really think the upgrade path is as important as the actual build. So this is really important information. The first thing you'll want to go out and do is get that second stick of memory. This is going to really, you'll see in the benchmarks in a second, but this will really increase your performance. It really helps increase your 1% and 0.1% lows. If you went out and got 4 gig sticks instead, you'll have the performance boost. You won't be able to upgrade this as easy, so you can skip this upgrade. But again, I would definitely, hopefully you didn't. Hopefully you got one 8 gig stick instead. But I definitely would recommend doing this first. It's a cheap and easy way to really improve your performance, and then you'll also hit that sweet spot for memory, so you won't have to upgrade memory for a very long time. The second thing you will want to do is add a discrete graphics card. Adding a discrete card such as like the RX 570 will really give you a good boost to your performance, and it will help you play more demanding games. Keep in mind, even though you add this graphics card, you still only have a $55 processor. This means you will then, once you add that graphics card, you will be bottlenecked on the CPU side of things. I'll show you what I mean shortly when we go over the benchmarks. Last note on this upgrade is that I would recommend checking out the subreddit Hardware Swap because you can find some used hardware. I know all this other stuff is supposed to be new, but if you're going to be buying a graphics card such as the RX 570 or like a 960 or even a 970, I would definitely recommend buying used as long as it's in good shape and it works, because you'll get steep discount, and you'll be able to save your money for other upgrades in the future. A 570 right now on hardware swap goes for about $80. If you want to buy it new, it's going to cost you about $120. And in my opinion, I would again save that $40 that you would spend on a new one, and then use that on one of the next two upgrades I'm going to talk about. The third thing you will want to do is grab another storage drive. It's $50 2TB hard drive will be perfect to offload your games to, right? Your documents, your pictures, family pictures, videos, all that kind of stuff can go in that 2TB hard drive. It costs you $50, pretty cheap upgrade, and it really will help decrease the stress of only having a 240 gig solid state drive. I mean, a 240 gig solid state drive is perfect for a boot drive and some of your programs, but as I said before, as I've just been talking about all day, it's not that great for when you want to install a bunch of games. And a 2TB hard drive is a perfect, cheap way to correct this issue. Now, the last step in upgrading the system would be to replace your CPU. Getting any of AMD's like 6 or 8 core chip on the AM4 platform will basically remove any bottleneck that the 3000G has caused. This upgrade will cost you about $120 if you go for something like the 2600. That's what it's going for right now, about $120. That's it. And your system would then be solid for many years to come. You'd have a 6-core, 12-thread processor, and you'd have a solid RX 570, and your system would be just, killing 1080p, 60 FPS plus for many, 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 many moons. Now, the total upgrade path for this build will cost you an additional $300, so you're doubling the cost of what the initial build would cost. And honestly, that's, in my opinion, a pretty reasonable price for the path that we would take on this, and for the performance that you would get. You're again starting with a $300 budget system, and you're upgrading it as you get money over time. The baseline system will run you allow you to do like esports games at like 900p pretty well. And then once you fully upgrade it through this, all 4 of these upgrades, you will then be able to play most modern titles at 1080p max settings at around 60 FPS. So you're getting a huge upgrade, you're going from, 900p low to 1080p max 60 FPS. So it's a pretty, great upgrade path for your system. It's a good way to go about, getting into PC gaming, in my opinion. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, how does this guy actually perform? I've been kind of talking about it the whole time, but not actually giving you guys results. Well, so I tested this in 4 different configurations with 4 different games. The first configuration was as the build is listed on the parts list without overclocking. The second was with the 3000G overclocked to 4 gigahertz, and its iGPU overclocked to 1600 megahertz. Quick note on that. Yes, you can overclock this with the stock cooler. It's a little bit louder, gets a little bit warmer, but you can overclock it with the stock cooler, no problem. I had no issues, at least. A third will be with an overclock, as well as an additional 8GB stick of memory, so we can utilize that sweet dual channel memory. And then the last one is going to be with the overclock, the extra 8GB of memory, and then also throwing in an RX 570 4GB version into the mix to see kind of like what the performance would be. I felt like these 4 configurations and the 4 games I chose would give you a good idea of how this build will perform as you decide to upgrade it. And now, so I guess we're on to the benchmarks. When utilizing the 3000G's integrated graphics, I kept the settings really simple. The resolution was set to 900p. All settings were set as low as they went. Render scale was at 100%. If I could actually set the render scale, some games don't let you do that, but I made sure it was at 100%. And then I also made sure that VSync was turned off. Once I added the RX 570 settings kind of changed from game to game, so make sure that you're looking at the chart, because the charts will have kind of like these specific settings for those games. Also keep in mind that since this is a starter gaming PC, I did focus on esports titles. If there are any games that you would like to see tested in any of these configurations, let me know, and I'll do my best to kind of like add them in the into like the description or into a comments below, so you guys can see kind of like what those do as well, or how it does in those games as well. The first game I tested was actually Fortnite, and surprisingly, this was playable, absolutely playable across all tests I did. And in fact, it was more playable in the early tests than the later ones. As you can see on the chart, by overclocking and utilizing dual channel memory, average frame rates 1% lows and 0.1% lows all basically doubled. And then once you throw the RX 570 and you push the settings to max at 900p, all of a sudden like average frame rates doubled again, but then the 1% and the 0.1% lows tanked. And I tested this several times. I wasn't sure if it was accurate, that is, but ultimately this is because the CPU can't handle all the extra frames being tossed at it, and so it gets bogged down pretty easily. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where that the CPU, the 3000G, this guy right here, is going to begin to bottleneck your GPU once you add one. And I noticed that if you turned off the shadows and decrease the view distance, this issue is more or less removed. The actual low, like the 1% and the 0.1% lows, go up a lot more once you turn off those two. So I would definitely recommend that you do that, just because again, your CPU can't handle, this CPU can't handle that much processing. Once you add like a 2600, 1600, 3600, anything like that, whatever, 6 or 8 core processor on the AM4 platform, this will completely go away. You can max it all out. But for right now, since the CPU is bottlenecked, you'll have to be considerate of that. The second game I tested was CSGO. This as well is playable at 900p across the board. We do see that once we overclock the 3000G and add dual channel memory, the CPU does begin to get bogged down with frames. Again, the same situation. It has too many frames getting thrown at it. It can't handle that many frames. And so the 1% and the 0.1% lows take a pretty solid hit. Even with the hit, I will say that the game was definitely playable, but wasn't as smooth as if we were just playing it like at stock speeds. It didn't look as good before, but it wasn't as smooth. And again, when we added the RX 570 for this test, it was actually completely fixed. There was no issues with any of that. The third game I tested was League of Legends. During these tests, we found that at 900p minimum settings, the 3000G had absolutely no problems even at the stock settings, even without overclocked or without the extra stick of RAM. There were a few hiccups here and there, and that explains why we had oddly low 0.1% lows. But in general, this was playable no matter what. It did see a massive boost in performance when we did add the RX 570, but it didn't really matter because, again, it was playable no matter what. This game doesn't seem to be very CPU bound at all, so that is good for this guy right here. The last game was GTA 5. So this is the last game I tested, and for a CPU that only costs $55 right now and retails for $50, I'm actually really impressed. There was slight screen tear in all of my tests on this game, but not too bad to ruin your experience at all. It was just kind of like noticed it when I was really paying attention. I noticed it. Also, with the 570, once I installed the RX 570, it wasn't even able to play 900p at all. It was because it was pushing too many frames out, and it was very choppy. The system would just lock up. But honestly, it didn't matter too much because once I switched it over to 1080p, the GTA 5 ran perfectly fine, and it performed better than any other test that I had done. Well, at least in GTA 5. Alright, so this is a pretty solid starter PC. If you can save another $200 up front, I would definitely recommend just getting the $500 budget PC that I did a video on a few weeks ago to start with. But for those of you who can't, or those of you who just plan on playing esports titles or games like Stardew Valley, maybe even Terraria, I did test Stardew Valley, and it played absolutely flawless on the system. But you can play games like that, no problem at all with the system, whether you overclock it, add a graphics card, or anything. So this system is perfect for that. This system is great. It's honestly a great budget option that you can kind of add to as time goes on. And I honestly had a blast. I had so much fun messing around with the 3000G, and I was really impressed with how much performance they pack into $50. And if you don't want to play AAA titles, this thing is I'm actually seriously impressed with what you can get for this chip. As I said before, if there are any other games you would like benchmarked on this system, let me know in the comments below. If you guys found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up. If you hated it, feel free to give me a thumbs down. You guys all are entitled to your own opinions, but please, if you don't like this video, let me know why in the comments below. I can't fix anything. I can't solve the issues that you don't like if you don't let me know why you don't like it, right? Also, check out my latest video. It'll be popping up right there. Is it right there? should be right here. And don't forget to subscribe for more tech content just like this. If you have any questions at all, let me know about those in the comments as well. And thank you guys so much for watching.